Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And we have a lot of very interesting updates, and first probably it's better to start with Zelensky himself with his updates from his side. And it's very difficult to understand what exactly is this man thinking about, because according to information we have and according to updates that are coming from Ukraine, one get a feeling that it's maybe we are the witnesses of the final days of Zelensky. For example, these days he was interviewed by the Times, the Economist, and according to information we have, he shared with people his opinion about the 2024 and his plans. And according to Zelensky, the final battle, the last battle for Ukraine, is going to take place around Crimea, for Crimea and around Crimea. And we are talking not about the southern Kherson area, Dnipro river. We are also talking about the Black Sea. So no matter the situation, the critical situation in his country, from the economy perspective, from society perspective, from military aid, he still believes that Ukraine is able to return control over the entire country. I'm not saying that it's not true or it's impossible, but I think what base does he have for this way of thinking? Furthermore, today we got another interesting information from the Times, and according to information we have, there are very high chances that Donald Trump will win the next president American elections, and that means that there are going to be no more military assistance from the United States of America. And currently London is trying to find a solution how to support Ukraine in the conflict against Russia, even if the United States of America will stop helping Ukraine at all. So these are plans of Western countries, but as I understand, at least based on the events that we received on the 2nd of January of 2024, the Russians have completely different plans, because during, for example, the previous night of the local time, the Russians were bombing, or they continue bombing Ukraine with significant number of drones. We just discussed in the previous video that on the 1st of January, the Russians used around 90 drones all over the entire Ukraine. The day before, they used 50 drones, and the previous night, the Russians continue bombing Ukraine, trying to overload the Ukraine air defense, trying to force the Ukrainians to spend so expensive missiles and so on. And there were explosions not just in Lvov, the explosions took place everywhere. The explosions took place in Lvov, in Kyiv, in Kharkiv, in Sumy, in Poltava. Significant number of drones, and after that there was a very short operational pause, a very short period of time of silent time, and at 7 a.m. of the local time, the first Russian resources start publishing information about the strategical aviation in the sky of Russian Federation. 17 airplanes Tu-95 and 4 planes of Tu-22 with significant number of missiles raised in the sky and start attacking and bombing Ukraine with missiles of type Ha-101, Ha-555 and Ha-55. Significant number of missiles start flying in direction of Ukraine, and somewhere at 8 a.m. of the local time, we start receiving first updates about explosions in Kharkiv. We start receiving updates about explosions, significant number of explosions in Kyiv itself. We have some videos of some results of fire on the streets, the damaged buildings. The Ukrainians start using their own air defense system to somehow, those missiles, those systems that left and missiles that left, but as I understand it didn't help. We have a lot of videos of Kinzhals strikes, and according to information we have, on the morning of the 2nd of January, the Russians used significant number of Kinzhal, up to 11, or some sources are saying up to 13 missiles were used, and this is like the biggest number of Kinzhal type of missiles that the Russians used since the beginning of the special military operation. For example, on this video we can see another Ha-101 rocket flying somewhere above Kyiv, and we see that there is no resistance, no problems, no barriers from the Ukraine air defense. So during the starting from 7 a.m. till, let's say, 9:30 a.m. of the local time, the Russians, after the previous attack with Geran drones, were bombing Ukraine with Kinzhals and cruise missiles all over the entire Ukraine. And somewhere at 9:30 a.m. of the local time, the new wave, third wave of missiles entered Ukraine from Sumy region. So two waves took place. One wave took place at 6:55 a.m. of the local time of 2nd January. The second wave took place at 8:20 a.m. of the local time, and the third wave of missiles entered the territory of Ukraine at 9:30. So every single hour and a half, the Russians launched another wave of missiles. And after the Russians finished with 3 waves of missiles, another wave of drones entered Ukraine. So this is a disaster. And as I told you at the beginning of this video, there are very high chances that we are the witnesses of the final days, maybe even hours, of Zelensky and his regime, because I can't understand how any country can survive under such a heavy pressure. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground, because despite the situation with missiles, we also have a lot of updates from the ground. And the most important updates are coming from, let's say, first important series of updates are coming from Avdiivka. The Russians continue their offensive operation on the northern flank of this area, trying to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt. And as you can see, according to geolocations and configuration of the front line, the Russians managed to reach the final line, the final defense belt. Let's say not the final. They managed to get the Ukrainian well-fortified area that lays in front of the Russians on the way to Ocheretino. And we are talking about these 2 fortification belts. This is the first one, and a little bit to the north is the second one. And now the Russians try to find the solution how to capture these 2 belts. And if they are able to do this, of course, this will bring them significant results, because from that moment the Russians will have a very stronghold and stable foothold in this area, which will allow them to concentrate critical mass and to stay safe and keep them safe under Ukrainian artillery fire or FPV drone strikes. So the most probably easiest way from let's think in perspective, the Russians can attack just in front, and maybe they're doing this right now, because we got some geolocated confirmation of Russian artillery strikes. So basically something like artillery preparation. The Russians are saying that they're using Krasnopol, these accurate shells, to attack and destroy the Ukrainian positions. And as a result of those strikes, the Ukrainian forces along the railways were damaged and destroyed. But when talking about this morning, some Russian sources reported that the Russians launched an offensive operation in this direction, trying to bypass the fields and to answer these 3 lines that located, like, let's say 200-300 meters to the west. So this is like the Russian attempt to attack and the next Russian target. And as I understand, basically the Russians are trying to cut this area in 2 parts and to split the Ukrainian support of the northern fortification area from Berdichi. Very likely the Russians will continue to their attacks, because we see missile attacks and all these things can be combined and something very interesting can happen. Furthermore, we got some geolocated videos from Avdiivka itself. The city turned into the ghost town, and we see Ukrainians who are moving from one building to another. The situation is very critical. They're not on this video we see something like desperate or something like this. Now we are moving to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction, because we have also a lot of very interesting updates from this area. And some sources are saying that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed completely establish control over the territories along the railways. So based on the geolocations, we have some mappers have updated their maps showing this territory under complete Russian control. And according to other sources, the Russians are saying that currently the Russians are planning to move further to the north and with the purpose to restore control over the fields to the south and to get as close as possible to Klishchiivka and to Andreevka itself. And the Russians are able to do this. They can repeat the Wagner's pass, this because that was the Wagner pass, and without any problems the Russians do have possibilities to get this area, to establish control over these three lines, trenches, fortifications if there are some, but it's going to be very difficult to continue movement further because on the west from this point the Russians will face one of the most powerful fortifications area on this direction, the very rich network of trenches along canal, fortification belt a little bit to the west south of Klishchiivka, and of course Klishchiivka itself. So to capture this white sky, this white cloud, is there going to be no problem for the Russians, but it's going to be very difficult to continue further. When talking about the northern direction, today on the 2nd of January, we received the first geolocated confirmation of Russian positions and Russian progress inside of Bogdanovka. This video was published and prepared by the 56th Motorized Brigade, which is responsible for defending Bogdanovka. It was like something like New Year video showing the results of work of this 56th Brigade, how they were bombing Russians and so on. And on this footage, on these scenes, just in a second we're gonna see on this video, just a second, here we go. On this video we can see the first buildings in Bogdanovka. This is it. So just a second. This is it. On this is Bogdanovka. This is the north eastern part of the village, and this area was under very heavy fire from the Ukrainian side, which confirms this is the area. This video was geolocated, which confirms the Russian presence inside of the village. It's very difficult to understand where exactly the Russian positions end, but at least when talking about this geolocation, we can make a conclusion that currently the Russians control something like this. This is a very huge and important progress, and obviously now the Russians do have possibilities to continue offensive operation further. But even from this perspective, we see that the Russians currently face two problems. The first, there are two belts, two strongholds. This is the first Russian problem, and this is the second Russian problem that they need somehow to solve. And as I understand, and according to previous geolocations we have, the next things the Russians are planning to do is to clear and to complete the battle for the northern fortification area, for the northern stronghold, because if the Russians are able to establish control over this territory and to force the Ukrainians to step back further to the central part of Bogdanovka, that will mean that the Russians are able to establish control over this territory without any problems, and they will be able to continue movements and their progress further to the southeast western part of the village. So as we can see, according to geolocations, the Russians have very good and nice progress on the northern flank of Artyomovsk, and the Russians who have a very nice progress to the south. So the foothold of the Ukrainians in this area is getting less and less. We haven't received anything from Kupiansk, Liman, Solidar, South Donetsk, Zaporozhye and Kherson direction. Once again, we see that Uday has disappeared. Maybe something happens to him once again. As I understand, today the main focus will be about the missiles and Gerain strikes, and as I understand, during the day we're going to receive a lot of videos, geolocated confirmations, and the numbers of losses of not just Ukrainian soldiers but probably NATO officers and every single one who was responsible for attack at the New Year Eve on Belgorod. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.